Yeah, okay. So now that we've gone through most of the Nuggets offseason stuff, let's get on to the draft. We have some really positive things to talk about. We got DaRon Holmes. We were all watching the draft live-ish, right?
Mhm.
And we knew that the rumors of a promise that the Nuggets had made were out there, and we knew that other teams certainly had at least enough interest in Duran for him to be mocked to a couple of different teams than the Nuggets earlier, before the actual night of the draft, right? We traded up to get him. We traded 3 second-round picks to trade up with the Phoenix Suns, to get DaRon at 22, right before the Milwaukee Bucks. Do you think that John Horst, the GM of the Bucks, would have taken DaRon if we had not traded up with Phoenix to get him?
Yes, I do. I think so because if you, I don't want to be as a draft analyst. I don't want to be too critical of picks. But the Bucks, for me, I think they kind of panicked with their next pick. They took AJ Johnson, who was somebody who's a long ways away, playing, and overseas in the league. He did. I think Duran was the guy for them, and they kind of had to pivot off that. So I know there's a couple teams in that range that wanted Holmes. The Knicks. It was
Yeah.
rumored that the Wolves wanted him as well, um, and also maybe the Bucks. So I think those were kind of three teams that wanted Holmes. I don't think he would have lasted at 28 just because
Yeah.
of how kind of I think he was a really great prospect. So um, Booth did what he did, and he went and got his guy, and I think that's important. I think that it's important. I think that he's a GM that has very strong convictions. That
Yeah.
he's very set to say, you know what, we're going to take Christian Brown here, and we're going to take Watson at this pick, and we're going to take Strother, and we're going to take these guys, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. At least he tried, and he was kind of convinced. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
didn't hesitate. So I think that's a good part of the way he kind of operates. So. But yeah, I was very happy that they got him because I think he fills a need, and I also think that he was best player available at that pick as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I also think that the Bucks, when you say they had the panic pick, it seems in is it AJ Johnson was the
Yeah.
the prospect they took there. I had also seen like Kalel Ware and Yves Missy mocked to them as well, but Kalel got taken surprisingly to me by the Miami Heat in the lottery,
Yep.
and Yves Missy went to the Pelicans,
Mhm.
like right before I think they were at 20. So, they probably would have taken one of those 2 in my opinion, if not for, if Duran had been off the board, but obviously they were not available. So that was interesting. It was an interesting, I think, draft night for other teams in the first round in particular. But before we talk about other teams, I wanna finish off talking about what the Nuggets did on day 2. So they traded out of the second round when they traded one of those. Their 1 second round pick was part of the deal to trade up with Phoenix, as well as a couple of future second round picks. And they didn't end up drafting anybody in the second round, but they did sign 3 guys to two-way contracts. And Will, if you could bring up the video of Trey Alexander, because he
Let's
is
go.
my favorite of the 3. I remember CT talking about Trey with me. I think it was back in like February or something.
Yeah.
Um, because I was talking to CT about like who should the Nuggets draft, especially as like a potential more ball handler depth. And you actually thought that the Wolves might be interested in Trey. So it was pretty surprising to me when I saw that he went undrafted at all, because I agreed. Not only would they might be interested, but I think he's a really like interesting ball handler, prospect, shot creator. But he's also Mike Conley's cousin. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So CT, could you tell me like why I see Jamal Murray when I see Trey Alexander play basketball?
I've had a lot of people bring up that comp before, and I could see why. Um, I've luckily been able to see Trey play a lot in person over the years, playing in the Big East. I actually saw him play at the Garden last year against St. John's, where he dropped like 30 points. Really good game from him, and I thought at that point like he'd go in contention for the first round. This was the game here, right here. Um, Really good showing. And I think, at Creighton over the years, he's really developed his game and kind of taken, many leaps, over the years as well, assuming higher usage over the years. This year he played off the ball a little bit, but Creighton didn't really have, I would say, a pure point guard. They had more of a scoring 3-point guard. So Trey had assumed a lot of on the ball responsibility as well. The thing I like Trey is that he's a really dynamic mid-range shooter. He's able to really get into the mid-range and finish with a floater, finish isolation, finish in the pick and roll. And I think
Very versatile shot creation. Yeah.
definitely very versatile as a shot creator. 6'4" guard, and he took the assignment of the best opposing player on the other team, in the backcourt for Creighton. He was guarding Devin Carter. If you really want to watch a game like that, you can see like Trey's ability to shine. It's against Providence, versus Providence. Even against UConn as well. When UConn came to Creighton blew them out. He was guarding Tristan Newton, he was guarding Stephon Castle, and I think Trey's really underrated as far as his ability as a shot creator, but also as a two-way player. He's a really good defender at 6'4", can play on or off the ball as well, and I think that versatility is something that the Nuggets lack. And yeah, I'll go on the record here saying that I think he's a better player than Pickett. So we'll see, what happens there. But I think it's a big summer league coming up for him to see if he can kind of make an imprint, moving forward. But yeah, this was a guy that I talked about as a first round guy, earlier, like Gray said, earlier in the year. So to see him kind of go undrafted, I think that was a really great value. And I think Calvin did a really good job on the two ways this year compared to last year, where kind of picked proven commodities, and this year he kind of picked more versatile college players. So
he's a bit.
I thought it was a good pick.
He's a bit on the slighter side. He does have good height. He's almost 6'4" without shoes, but he's only 187 right now. So definitely need to fill out more, probably for the NBA level. But so like you said, they signed him on this two-way. Will, was there anything that you wanted to say about or ask about this prospect?
I was just kind of surprised that he fell to us, we didn't draft him, but that he was available and went undrafted. And we had talked about the draft maybe not being the best draft class of all time, and we had heard that sentiment all year, all season. But during the draft, seeing people's reactions was really interesting, talking about people trading and going up and getting Dillingham, and now Trey Alexander's coming to us. When it comes to him, my question was more broad. Like, how did you feel now that the draft's over about the reactions to the draft, and, whether teams were aggressive? Because it seems like people had a very clear vision for what they wanted, like in the players they were going after. And this guy who's really talented, not getting drafted in a draft class that seemingly wasn't that great. Like, what did you make of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think, when you see the kind of depth of the class was pretty good, I think. When you kind of go down the board, later in the first round, his teammate Baylor Shireman got picked by the Celtics at 30. I was pretty high on Baylor, and, at my draft board, I had him as a top 25-ish guy. But yeah, I think with Trey, it's just, I think teams were a bit concerned about his quickness and speed as a guard. He plays a bit more methodical like Murray does. So he's not going to wow you with athleticism, but he did catch a couple posters this year. At Creighton, almost had a triple-double as well. And he's a multifaceted guard. He could rebound, he could assist. Pretty good shooter as well, and he can play on or off the ball. So, I think hypothetically, if he gets the chance, him next to Murray would be kind of a good fit. But yeah, I think more so
playing with himself.
Yeah, two of those
it's
guys.
Like Jokic said, I wish I had two of me.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of just him sliding down the board, where his teams were a little bit more concerned about the athleticism angle of it, and the shooting was kind of hit or miss as well. And kind of, he's more of a tweener. Shooting. Yeah, 3-point shooting. And he's more of a tweener as well. Is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? Can he successfully do both? I think that's mainly the question with him. But I think on a two-way, it's great value for the Nuggets.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the Summer League, and if he plays in the G League and gets experience, and who knows, he could surprise us. And, we need bodies. We need people. So please, whoever, please step up.
We need bodies. So another one of the two ways was PJ Hall, who I want to talk about a little bit. I mentioned on our last show how we signed PJ Hall from Clemson, and he was Hunter Tyson's teammate for a really long time at Clemson, because I think Hunter was a super senior at Clemson. He was there 5 years. So he played with PJ for a pretty long time. He's classified himself as like a center, but I've also seen him play with other bigs at Clemson. Can you just talk a little bit about like, yeah, like what position is he exactly and what kind of role do you see for him? Like he's going to be on a two-way. He's probably going to be playing mostly in the G League anyway, but what kind of position do you see for him, on an NBA floor?
Yeah, I think with Hall, I think he's definitively a 5, I would say, even though he's a bit smaller. But he's pretty physical, though. If you see in these clips, he's really throwing his weight around the paint. Really able to carve out space as well, and he's really physical. But
Yeah.
he's got the ability to play inside out. If you watch him in the tournament, he really carved up a lot of the teams he faced. I think they made the Elite Eight. He was really good in that game in the Elite Eight to put them into that position. So he's a good passer as well for a big. He can really set the offense up. Kind of use him as a hub as well. So yeah, I think he's going to be like he's interesting at least. Like he's got a pretty versatile skill set. Defensively, I think is more hit or miss, but I do like the mobility for the most part. And I think offensively is going to be his calling card. Where he can kind of attack closeouts a bit. You can dump the ball down to him in the post.
Yeah,
But
really
also
comfortable putting the ball on the floor
Yep.
from different parts of the court.
Like,
Yeah.
kind of like
Ooh.
DaRon as well. DaRon's pretty comfortable putting the ball on the deck, and I think PJ's the same way. But yeah, I think he's going to be a pretty good, like I said, pretty good two-way signing for what the Nuggets kind of got there.
So, well, did you want to say anything?
I was just
about
gonna say,
PJ?
if he ends up being like the next underrated 5, like I Heart, and we move off him too quick, and he like signs this massive deal with the Thunder, I'm gonna be pissed. God.
We're definitely going to talk about some of those massive deals. But okay, so the last prospect I'm going to talk about was Jaylin Williams. I believe the Nuggets signed him to an Exhibit 10. Is that
Yes.
right? So that is a deal that gives the Nuggets basically first rights to convert it to a two-way should they want to. But he could play on the summer league team. He could participate in training camp, that kind of thing, until the Nuggets were to make such a decision. And I hadn't really looked into him as much, but he's like a forward, right?
Mhm.
He's more like a 3-4 in the NBA, but he definitely seemed to play a little bit bigger at Auburn. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about him and what maybe the Nuggets are maybe interested in when they took this? Because I didn't really necessarily expect them to, even if they took a couple of undrafted guys. They only signed 2 of their 3 two-way slots, but they also signed this guy to an Exhibit 10. I wonder, like, what's the vision that they're seeing right now in terms of who they're putting in their developmental pipeline.
Yeah, I actually think it was rumored from what I read in the article that the Nuggets wanted to take him at 56 if they kept the pick.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I read in the article from I think an Auburn person wrote that. But yeah, I've been a fan of Jaylin for a while. He was a 5th-year senior this year. Played in a really good Auburn team, over the years. Versatile forward, really athletic as well. Really good closeout attacker. Could really put you on a poster and quick decision maker and really good shooter this year. I think he shot around like 38%, I want to say, around there. He's been pretty good as far as, increasing his volume and pretty good slasher. Good defender for a 4-man, 3-man. I think you play more of the wing. In college, you play the 4 because, in college, you can if you really are like 6'7", 6'6", like you can get away with playing the 4. But I think Jaylin's probably gonna play the 3. But yeah, no, I'm just high on Jaylin. Like he's gonna make it. I think he's gonna be a player in this league as far as like an end of the bench guy or a rotation piece on like maybe on a worse team. But I think Jalen's gonna be good. Like I said, I'm in favor from getting the last two-way. But the Nuggets have a lot of wings right now, so I don't know how he's gonna fare there. But I think you could have done worse on the two-ways, but and the Exhibit 10 deal. So I think he's going to be pretty good. And he played beside your favorite player, Grace, and Janai Broom.
Oh yeah, is that how you say his name? I've been saying
Janai, yeah.
Janai. Okay, not
Yep.
Johnny. Janai. I love Janai Broom. I really was sad when he withdrew from the draft. I think in this draft class he would have absolutely gone first round, but unless teams were just all totally dumb. But we're going to talk about that a little bit because Will, you alluded to this a little bit with certain teams being particularly aggressive to like get the specific guys that they wanted, especially with the Wolves and Tim Conley going after Rob Dillingham. Yeah, the Wolves, they traded up for Rob Dillingham. They traded with the Spurs, some future picks with the Spurs to move up to 8 in this draft, and so that they could take Rob Dillingham. When I first saw that the Spurs had picked him, I thought, okay, that's another guard, and we could use Wemby to protect him defensively or whatever. And who knows? Like, it's a flyer. They're drafting in the lottery. Why not? But then I found out the Wolves were taking him instead. The Wolves got to keep their pick in the first round because they were trading future picks. So they still got to pick at 27. And we've talked a bit on the show about how they need shot creation, but they decided to pass on Isaiah Collier. What do you think of that strategy of kind of just they got their guy. They got their guy in Dillingham. They still had another opportunity to get another shot creator in Collier, but they decided instead to go with Terrence Shannon Jr., who I think is another great prospect. We've talked about him as a possibility for the Nuggets, as like a plan B, plan C type thing in the first round. But he's not exactly like what at least in my opinion the Wolves need. So yeah, what do you think of them passing on Collier?
I think it's interesting because I had Collier as a top 5 guy on my board. So I had Dillingham a little bit further down, had him in the top 10. I personally would have preferred Collier just because I think he's a more playable defender than Dillingham. I think Dillingham defensively was really not, if you watch the tape of Kentucky, was not great at all. Was pretty concerning, especially in that tournament. Like, we got really like torched badly. I think with him though, you can kind of see the vision what Conley wants, and this is one of those classic Conley trades, right? Where he's going for the smaller guard, and it makes sense because the Wolves can maybe compensate a bit for his deficiencies. They have Jaden McDaniels, they have an Anthony Edwards, they have Gobert, right? You know what I mean? So they have wing defenders, and they have a best rim protector to probably ever play the game, right? So, I think it makes sense. But I do think now that the Wolves, it kind of looks like it'd be Conley's successor, right, down the line, maybe, when Conley ages out. But
right, that Conley, the guard, yeah,
Conley, yeah. But I do think that it does add a bit more of a vulnerable spot for the Wolves, when you have him out there, because you could really attack him defensively. But they're betting on the shot creation, they're betting on the dynamic offense and the creation ability and the shooting panning out over the defense. So. Interesting move, Conley trading future assets to get their guy. And I think it's interesting as well because a lot of the discussion for the Nuggets was maybe they should trade their assets and go up to get a guy right in that lottery pick range. And Conley did that. He went and got his guy in Dillingham. That was his guy. And, we'll see if that works, but he went up to get his guy and that, we'll see how that kind of fares. But at least he went for it, and he had to trade future assets, right? So he traded he traded like one or how many first round picks?
It was like a pick and a half, basically.
It was
a first and 2 swaps, I think.
I think that's cheaper than I thought it was then.
Maybe it was just one swap then. It was definitely like at least a swap and a first.
Because he moved up to 8, right? Was it 8 or 10?
Yeah, 8.
So I mean, he did move up pretty far up the board.
Right.
From where they were kind of at. So, and he got to keep that late to first to pick Terrence Shannon, which I think TSJ is a good player. But I don't think he really addressed a lot of their
first
needs.
and a protected swap.
Okay, so that's a bit down the line, right, for the swap. So
yeah, I heard Tim Conley was just like enamored with Dillingham. Like, he saw him and he was super high. He was talking about how amazing he was, how impressed he was. It's like it is very classic Tim Conley, a small guard who could potentially be attacked on defense, which we saw over and over again here in Denver. And maybe this works out for him and he looks like a genius still, and people can laud him as a, great GM, or there are going to be some questions with that pick. But they could have picked Collier again. Right? Which is pretty wild. But do you feel like even like with drafting Dillingham, there's no way they could have drafted Collier, or should they have kind of like Grace was saying, doubled down and tried to just solidify their shot creator?
Yeah, I think it probably would have been a bit too redundant. I think because you have Conley on the roster, you have and obviously you can play point as well, and you have Dillingham, and Collier is a better defender than Dillingham, but he's not the best on that end. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think picking Shannon it was smart because it looked like they moved up with Wendell Moore now as well, which was another one of their first round picks that Conley took. That was actually Conley's first pick, I think, on the job.
Mm,
And I think he got picked before his TB, if I'm not mistaken. Don't
wow.
quote me on that, but I do think that he was picked before Christian. So, but yeah, they kind of basically was a swap, right? You kind of traded out Wendell Moore, and he moved Terrence Shannon into that role. So,
Gotcha.
kind of makes sense from a positional standpoint. But yeah, I think the Dillingham pick is it's interesting, because the second apron stuff and how do you improve the
Hmm.
roster. And like we said, Conley had his guy, and he went for it, and we'll see if it pans out.
Yeah, the Wolves are in an interesting place, kind of almost similar to the Nuggets, depending how you look at it, where they're contending teams. They just need to make a couple more moves, maybe. The Nuggets have won a championship already. The Wolves are in the hunt. They have a need that they're trying to address. The Nuggets lost things that worked well for them that we're still trying to replace. So it's going to be interesting with this new CBA and how these GMs are operating, trying to find like our assistant GM, and when he was introducing DaRon, was saying that teams really succeed when they find like their niche that they're good at, this special thing they're good at. And the Nuggets feel like they have this super clear idea of the thing that they want to do with these young players, and that's going to be the thing that they're going to be good at and contributing with Jokic. So we'll see how that works out. I'm hoping it does.
And I just thought it was a really interesting draft, and just kind of summarizing it in that way, that in this like bad draft, teams were very aggressive in getting specifically what they wanted, and so we saw a couple of surprises in who slipped back just because other teams already had a specific idea of what they wanted, so it wasn't necessarily going for a best player available strategy necessarily. Like we talked about Dalton Connect falling to the Lakers, and Isaiah Collier falling, obviously. So yeah, it's just an interesting, trend.
But yeah, CT, you said, as an analyst, you don't want to like knock any picks, but did you have any teams that you were like, they won the draft possibly, or I really like what this team did?
I really liked what the Spurs did. I like getting Castle, and I think they had Harrison Ingram in the second round. I think they only picked one guy in Castle, but I think Castle's going to be a really good addition to what they have. And what other teams did I like? I actually, reluctantly, I'll say I like the Wolves draft. But I think getting a guy like Shannon, who I had a close to lottery grade on, was pretty good value for them as well. Connect, I think, was a good pick for the Lakers too. I think there was a lot of good picks. Klingon falling to where he did it with the Blazers was another good pick as well.
It was so wild to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Blazers made out pretty well there. So, but yeah,
They
I
didn't
think
even
the
have to
draft
trade
looks-
up. There was all
Yeah.
this stuff about how they'd have to trade up if they wanted Klingon, but they didn't
Mhm.
have to.
Yep, definitely. So, I always like the draft every year, but I thought this was more fun because it was kind of unpredictable. So, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the best part about it. So,
What was the biggest like surprise for you, do you think?
definitely the Bucks pick with the AJ Johnson. Yeah, because he averaged like 2 points a game.
Wow.
So, yeah, I thought that was a pretty big surprise. Kello Ware going to the Heat, I thought was a pretty big surprise.
That was pretty shocking to me because
Yeah.
I don't quite see it, not just like a basketball fit, but just their general like philosophy of like, we want basically almost a finished product who can work hard, and like the athletic tools tend to be like lower on the priority list, it seems.
Mhm.
But Kello Ware has like, top 10 athletic tools in even a normal draft. So I just think it's interesting to see them go for, it seems like more of an upside swing.
Yeah,
than
I
they
think you can
normally
play
would.
him beside Bam as well because he can stretch the floor. So I think that's kind of an interesting point as well because I know they wanted to play Bam a little bit more on the floor. But yeah, I think that was a pretty interesting pick. Yeah, that was probably like one of the bigger heater picks that I saw. But yeah, otherwise that was interesting. So
Please remember to like, subscribe, and share on YouTube. Hit the notification bell. Leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Amazon Music, and now Apple Music as well. Finally got that done. That's awesome. And just, always remember, winning is fun and losing sucks, especially losing the off season because those only come around once a year.